Even with all the distress in the world now, when you turn the news on, I quite often put my hand on my chest and say, Vishwa Shanti Hum, or I have Lama Gangchen up on the wall, peace with everything, everything with peace. I love that. I try and transmit peace where I can.
Hello, and welcome to Life with a Lama Healer. Thanks for joining us today. Today's the first day of spring, so happy springtime. And today I wanted to talk about the principle of a bodhisattva. We use this word a lot on this podcast, and all the people that I've interviewed, in my opinion, are bodhisattvas. And a bodhisattva is a person who has directed their mind to become awakened. They're on the path to reaching enlightenment, full awakening, for the benefit of others. So the Mahayana and Vajrayana path of Buddhism, this is a very important principle and path to reach enlightenment. And so the bodhisattva is someone who all their activities throughout their day is directed towards being a benefit to other people and directed towards full awakening, training their minds to become fully awakened and free from all of our delusions and reach the highest state of our potential of enlightenment. And so it reminds me of this really beautiful poem that I read many years ago, and I refound this poem by Kahlil Gibran, and says, I awoke to see that life was joy. Then I awoke to see that life was service. Then, in the dawn of awakening, I saw that service is joy. It really points to the enthusiasm and joy that we hear from all of our guests when they share about being of service to others, helping others, and really who Lama Gangchen was. Lama Gangchen was a fully realized Buddha, so his whole life was directed towards helping others. But those of us who are on the path to becoming Buddhas, are walking the path of the Bodhisattva who's in training to become a Buddha, we really look to have our daily activities directed towards being of service and helping others. So that includes talking on the telephone, using our computers, walking down the street, walking the dog, doing the dishes. All of our daily activities can be directed, if our mind is directed towards serving others and reaching full awareness and following the Bodhisattva path. So today, I'd like to introduce you to a true Bodhisattva. We're privileged to have as our guest today Jeanne Gregory, who is from London, England. And Jeanne's going to share with us many, many stories of how she has integrated the Dharma and Lama Gangchen's teachings into her daily life. Jeanne is a nurse and a pain therapist. She's a mother of 6, and a single mother of 6. And so she has a very, very, very busy life. And she has shared with us incredible examples of how she's integrated the self-healing practice and all the mantras into her daily life as a nurse and as a mother and a healer, really. And she was one of the founders of starting the England Sangha many, many, many years ago in the 1990s, where they were doing the self-healing practice together. So Jeanne is a great example of how to integrate the Dharma and Lama Gangchen's teachings into a life that is super, super busy. Jeanne's a true bodhisattva whose stories of healing and peace are an inspiration to all of us. And please join me in welcoming Jeanne Gregory. We're really excited about this podcast, about the life of the great Tibetan Lama, Lama Gangchen Tulku Rinpoche, who was born in 1941 in Tibet and trained by many of the greatest Tibetan masters. He traveled to the West in the 1980s, bringing with him the inner peace teachings of the Buddha. Lama was one of the greatest living humanitarians and spiritual masters of our time, and part of an unbroken lineage dating all the way back 2,500 years to Shakyamuni Buddha. So our vision in creating this podcast is really to preserve and share their remarkable stories about Lama Gangchen's extraordinary life. We'll interview senior students and longtime followers who worked with Lama Gangchen, traveled with him, studied with him, witnessed and experienced his incredible healings and miracles. So these stories, they're really precious jewels and inspire us to really see what's possible when we follow the inner peace teachings of the Buddha. So it's a real honor and privilege to bring these stories to you and the methods that really help us to reframe our sufferings, which brings us more inner calm, the ability to be more in the present moment with less stress and anxiety and fear, and to, experience more joy in our life and more peaceful in our life and more meaning really in our life. So please stay tuned for our conversations from this very, very rich spiritual heritage coming out of Tibet and the incredibly joyful, inspiring, mind-blowing, funny, touching stories about the remarkable life of a Lama healer, our beloved Lama Gangchen. Life with a Lama healer. Welcome to the show. Really looking forward to hearing your story about life with Lama Gangchen. Welcome.
Yeah, pleased to be here.
So I had this wonderful conversation with Lama Caroline about 6 months ago. She was in England. We did a video call and I met you for the very first time, which is really incredible because you've known Lama Gangchen all these years and so have I, but this was the first time we met. So I'm really excited to hear your story. So tell us, please, how did you meet Lama Gangchen?
I met him on a pavement in southeast London. A lovely face on a flyer on the floor on the pavement. And I picked up this flyer because this smiling face just attracted me. And I picked it up and it was a flyer for a London self-healing group and for a retreat. This was in 1997. So I took the flyer home with me and I just couldn't take my face away from looking at him on the flyer, this lovely picture of Lama Gangchen. And I rang the London group and spoke to the man that was running it, a guy called David. And they were doing self-healing. And I felt at first it was quite strange, all the waving of the hands flapping up and down and the chanting. And I thought, I don't know if this was with me, but I stayed with it and then began to enjoy it a bit. And they were talking about the retreat in Dorset. And I thought, oh, I'd really love to go. But being a single mum, and I had 6 young children I was looking after, 2 of whom I fostered. The other 4 were mine. So I was a bit of a one-man band, didn't have the funds to go. So David organised me a bursary to go for the day. So a friend of mine put me up in Dorset and I travelled down there. And when I arrived, I was making my way towards the hall where the session was going to be. And Lama Gangchen came out from a house just as we were walking, and he saw my children and took both their hands, one on each side. They were about 18 months and 2.5 years old at the time, and they just looked up at him and he just waddled along holding them, and they just looked so pleased with each other, and walking behind them thinking, oh, he's so lovely. They didn't take to anybody usually just like that, and they were quite happy holding his hand. It was absolutely lovely, and we went in, and Lama Gangchen was giving a commentary on non-formal education. And it was really interesting. I just thought, I've never heard such good sense. It all made sense to me. So we spent the whole day there listening, and at one stage, and this is something I still do, a big bee, like a hornet, flew into the hall. And Lama Gangchen pointed at it and he said, this is the way out. And he pointed to the window and it flew straight out.
Oh, wow.
Ever since then, if I have a bee or a wasp in my room, I point at it and point it to the way out. And they go, they invariably go. He taught me something there.
Oh, I need this technique because every time I go to Italy, I always have this challenge because they don't have screens on their windows in Italy and all these critters all come in the window. And so I need to practice this technique. Thank you.
Well, hold Lama Gangchen's relic and think of him and just point
Okay.
to the one and literally ask it to go out. You have to show him or open a
Yeah.
window, and it works.
Okay.
And later in the day, there was a dog barking. And he said in Tibet, they take off a soft shoe and clap it, and it stops the dog barking. Sadly, that doesn't work with my dog. I have tried. But the B one definitely works for me. But the non-formal education I found really good. And he said, just look at it like a spiritual supermarket. If these things work for you, follow it. If it doesn't, try something different. And I just thought there's no pressure here whatsoever.
I love that about Lama. And really, in Buddhism in general, I found to be like that. Buddhist teachers, they're very open minded. They don't want to convert you. If it's your karma and it's your time to come to the teachings, then you will. So beautiful. Open minded.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I went for the 2 days and I met some lovely people there. There was one a couple of years later where we went as well, where they had a Mongolian monk that came. And I camped there for 3 days, and that was amazing as well. We were dancing with Lama Gangchen. We travelled around and we were doing the overtuned singing that the Mongolian monks do. And
Wow.
it comes from the throat. So we were all making an awful noise trying to do
Right.
it.
Trying to learn it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was an amazing time as well. It's quite relaxed. I really enjoyed that. And, I learned to meditate and I really by then had learned self healing. So we started a little group in where I lived and we did self healing once a week at the bottom of a tower block in a very down and out area.
Did you rent space and then bring people together?
We didn't actually have to pay for it. It was a community space and we could use it. So we had 2 hours, I think it was on a Wednesday night, and there was a bit of a drug addict, alcoholic who lived next door. And he used to see me the day after and say, "Oh, it's so lovely when you're in there. It's so peaceful in this place. Nobody fights when you're here. Why don't you come every night?" He came in
Wow.
a few times, but it wasn't really his thing.
But he felt the energy.
He felt the energy and he always went home on the times we were there so he could be at home and he could feel our energy next door, he said. So we were there for a couple of years and then Lama Gangchen came to London to SOAS University and did a 2 day session. So I went to that and I took refuge with Lama Gangchen there, and he named me Ever Loving Great Bliss. And Lama Mikel was there as well. At the time, he was quite young, probably about 17. I've got a lovely picture of him with my children giving him a flower.
Beautiful. And why did you decide to take refuge with Lama? What was it about him that had you want to do that?
I just felt I loved his energy. He just made me feel very calm because I have a very busy life with 6 children working. Just a very busy life, really. And he just always reassured me you can just put this into your daily life. You don't have to spend hours doing practice. Put it into your daily life. And I just loved that. And it did help me.
So, Jeanne, a lot of our listeners have really busy lives also. So, can you tell us, how did you apply these spiritual practices into your daily life? How did you do that? How did you integrate it?
Well, one of the times at SOAS, I also met Lama Peter, who he said, "Oh, just say Om Muni Muni Shakyamuni Soha and visualize that mantra and send it to people as you're walking. Throw it. If you see an ambulance, throw it towards the ambulance." And I thought, well, I like this. So I started doing it. And one hopes it had some good energy that you were throwing. And so I have a dog, so I used to walk every day, the dog. And I used to do walking meditation as well. So I would recite self healing or sometimes have it on a tape and play it as I was walking along. But very soon after first meeting him, I was doing self healing at home and I was doing it for a friend who was seriously ill in hospital. And she was not far from passing. And whilst I was doing the self-healing, halfway through it, the hospital called me and said, "Oh, Patricia's just very peacefully died." And I thought, oh, how strange, just as I'm doing it. So I carried on doing it. But she'd been in quite a lot of pain previous to me doing this. And the nurse had said she just suddenly calmed down and passed peacefully. And I'm convinced doing self-healing for her helped her.
Wow. So you were visualizing your friend and then sending her the different aspects of the practice, the healer her.
Yeah, and I was dedicating the practice to her as well as I was doing it.
Wow, what a powerful experience.
Yeah, I have a nursing background, so I've always helped people. And since then, I've helped, must be now about 12 people pass, sitting with them, helping them pass over. And it's been quite a privilege, really. And I did go over to Albignano, I think it was in 2015 the first time I went. And I became very friendly with Lama Caroline. And Ginger said, "Don't worry, you haven't got time to do a lot of practice or come here very often. You put it into your life. This is good. This is carry on." And gave me all the rainbow practices. They were just writing them then. Caroline was teaching me as well because she was coming over. We set up a group.
You mean the Rainbow Bridge practice to helping people pass away?
Yeah, the Rainbow Bridge. It was called something different then. So I was just trying to help people be calm. We managed to hire a centre, an HIV centre where I was working. We managed to rent that out for weekends. And it had a very peaceful big lounge and a kitchen with a dining room. We set up a group there, and Lama Caroline would come over once a month. It was every other month to start with. Sometimes it was once a month. And we did self-healing, we did white Tara, and we had quite a solid little group there. We were called the Crystal Palace White Tara group.
Oh, what a nice name.
Yes, I would have loved to have been able to set up a really good centre that would still be going now, but we charged very little because it was quite a poor area and many people had to travel. So really, we just needed to cover the rent and Lama Caroline's airfares. And everyone would come and stay at my house. It was a bit like a party every weekend. We'd cook a big curry or something, and everyone would be sleeping all over.
You cook for everyone too?
Yes, and
Yes.
Lama Caroline's mum Joy would come, and it was a small
Wow, how
group.
beautiful.
But it was very
Mm.
relaxed, and we learnt such a lot because Lama Caroline's such an easygoing teacher. She taught us so
It's
much.
so smart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
I managed to get over to Albignano in 2015, and I stayed with Lama Caroline in the Colonia with her. And I was very fortunate to be invited to Lama Gangchen's house every day for lunch or an evening meal. I got to know everyone there, and he felt like family. I felt I'd found my family, and Caroline and I still say we're like sisters. And he just reassured me. I kept saying to him, "But everybody I meet keeps dying." He said, "No, no, 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 no. You're there to help them. Carry on doing that." Now, after being there for about a week, I think I stayed the first time, came back home, and a neighbour died 4 days later while I was with her. And then a Japanese friend of mine got cancer of pancreas, and I nursed her for a good 6 months. And Lama Gangchen did a video call for her and did some prayers with her. And we managed to have the most beautiful death with her, if you can say that about somebody dying. We had candles, we had Tibetan prayers for her, we didn't touch her. She sat up and she looked at me and she said, "Shall we go?" And she went to get out of bed. And I said, "No," I said, "just lie back down and relax a bit and let's do some prayers like Lama Gangchen told us." And we did. She took 2 breaths and died peacefully. And we were so lucky we didn't touch her, nobody cried. She went so peacefully. So we were able to leave her for almost 24 hours before they came and took her away, which was just the death that she wanted. She wanted a peaceful Buddhist death. And that's what she got. And it was a very peaceful passing.
And so Lama Gangchen and Lama Caroline were teaching you how to help people to die peacefully. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely. Yes, yes.
And did you feel that this was something that you were being called to do, something that was familiar to you to help people in this way?
Yes. My parents died when I was very young. My dad died when I was 11, and my mum when I was 13, and then my grandmother a couple of years later. An aunt who I was very close to died about 4 years after that. And I just thought, ooh, there's a lot of death around me. And I went into nursing when I was 18. And then at 20, I left London, spent 2 years traveling through Asia, and went to places like Iran and Afghanistan, places you can't go to now, just through India and up to Nepal, and traveled for 2 years. And I think that taught me an awful lot as well. It taught me to be extremely grateful for what I have, because obviously there's a lot of poverty. I did a bit of volunteering in a little hospital in Nepal, in Pokhara in Nepal, and we stayed in a little Tibetan refugee camp on the way up to Mount Everest. We didn't get as far as base camp, it was a bit too much for me. I couldn't handle
Yeah.
going over the bridges that wobbled.
So that was your first experience with the Tibetans. Is that
With
right?
Tibetans, yeah, and they were just so friendly and so hospitable. They cooked momos for us every day.
Love those momos.
Yes, yes.
And what year was that, Jean?
Oh, that was in 75 to about 78.
So that was the early days of the Tibetan refugees when they were in these refugees camps, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I hadn't really met Tibetan Buddhism by then. I had an interest in different religions, but hadn't really come across Tibetan Buddhism. And then after 2 years, came home, finished doing my nursing, got married, had 2 children. Then suddenly that relationship broke up and I moved into London. And while I was there, that's where I met Lama Gangchen on the pavement, his
Wow.
lovely face shining through. And I've still got that sort of picture of him in my mind from when I saw him on the pavement. That can't be on the floor. I must pick it up.
Yeah, made such an imprint. Well, that's such a perfect example of this saying of when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
He appeared on the pavement right in front of
There he
me.
was,
Yeah,
right in front of you.
yeah, yeah.
Incredible. You were telling me this story earlier about when people are at the end of their life and or when they're experiencing a lot of pain that you do some pain relief work with them. Can you share with us?
I do some pain therapy. Yeah.
Pain therapy, yeah.
And again, this is something I learned to do scalar therapy. I have a bit of arthritis in one hand and it helped that. And I got made redundant. I think it was in 2016 I got made redundant. You've got a nursing background. Why don't you do scalar? So that was when I was in Albignano. So when I got back, I bought all the equipment and did all the training. So since then, I've been doing scalar therapy, which is an absolutely amazing pain therapy. And I've used it with people who've got a lot of pain, not necessarily just when they're dying, but sometimes it can be sciatica or mainly orthopedic injuries, because I used to be an orthopedic nurse when I first started nursing, and bone injuries are very painful. And I found it worked so well. So I've been doing that. And I've found it really useful as well when people are a lot of pain at the end times, because it helps bring down endorphins, etc., and relaxes you a bit and does help with the pain. But I think really helping people pass over it is more just being at peace with it and being able to talk to people and reassure them and just being calm and making sure that they have a calm, peaceful passing. It's just been a real privilege.
I can imagine. Yeah. People have so much fear about death and dying, and there's so much fear about being in pain, whether it be emotional pain, but most physical pain too. So it's a very real critical time in one's life that you're really helping them.
And a lot of people are very frightened to be with somebody when they're dying. They think it's going to be something awful, but it can be something really peaceful. And I just find it a privilege to be with someone, a bit like being with someone when they're being born.
Yeah.
It's just the other end of the scale.
The life cycle.
I can remember before I knew Lama Gangchen nursing, I'd be with people dying sometimes, as you did just nursing. I would always feel if I was holding their hands when they were going, you would feel the energy just leave the body. And I just found it really helpful.
You said something about this other woman that you helped who you all managed not to touch her. Can you explain what that means?
Yes, so my Japanese friend who had cancer of the pancreas, basically they suggest when you're dying not to touch the body, to let the consciousness leave through the top of the head, and by touching them you can disturb that process. And I learnt about this. She wanted a peaceful Buddhist death, and as she was going, we knew she was very near the end. We had the Tibetan prayers going, we had candles alight, she had Tibetan incense burning, and she was lying there and she just looked at me and she got up and said, sat up and went to sit on the edge of the bed. And she said, "Shall we go now, Jean?" I said, "It's probably a good idea, but why don't we just lie back down for a little while and finish this prayer?" So she did. And, and she just took a big deep breath and just let it out. There was no distress breathing. She just went with that last breath. And we all sat around. We carried on. I carried on doing Rainbow Bridge prayers with her, and we didn't touch her. We delayed calling the doctor as long as possible. And then when he came, yeah, nearly 24 hours before we got the undertakers to come and take her away. And it was just a privilege to watch her go so peacefully. And I think she had some very close friends. We were all there. And yes, we were very sad to see her go.
Yeah, he always said that if we manage to leave our bodies peacefully, then we'll have a much more peaceful rebirth.
Rebirth, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, that life will be a much more peaceful person. Yeah. Jean, did you ever read any books? The Tibetans have a very detailed, hundreds of years of explanation about what happens when one dies and when one dies.
Yes, I've read Sogyal Rinpoche's books many times, and
The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying you've read.
funnily enough, that was my first introduction, the Tibetan Book of Dying or Living. I call it Tibetan Book of Living. Yeah, I call it living rather than dying. But
The other side of the hand, right?
we have a hospice very near us called St. Christopher's Hospice, and Sogyal Rinpoche used to teach there apparently. And I did a 2-day course there through my nursing on supporting people when they were dying. And I got that book there, and I had read that. That was a very good book. So, yeah, it was quite nice to know that the hospices were using that quite a lot and that he had been there teaching. Yeah, I had that as a bit of a background as well. And yes, I've read many different books now on death and on dying and on the process. And I did think for a little while that I would set up as a death doula, a bit like a birthing doula. You're there for births, just be as a business. But I didn't want to make it into a business because I'm a bit stupidly not very money orientated person, probably to my own detriment. But I don't know, it just didn't seem right for some reason. But I just seem to come across people or meet people or friends that have been seriously ill and passed. And 2 neighbours who passed, I just seem to go over there and they decide to go whilst I'm there. The rest of the family with my neighbour walked into the kitchen talking to the nurse. And an Irish lady called Mary was there, looked at me, and I said, "It's all right, Mary, you can just go peacefully." And I knew her family would scream when she died. So I kept very quiet and just sat with her, and she just passed. And it was quite peaceful. And it was very difficult because I had to go in the kitchen and tell her sisters and her husband that she'd passed. And I said, "Please do not go in and scream and grab her. Just go peacefully in there," which didn't exactly happen, but at least she managed to pass.
Jean, do you find that there's a lot of misconceptions and really just not knowing what happens?
We don't talk about death.
We don't talk about it. And so people don't know how to manage that situation. And then, of course, there's so much more suffering because of our lack of knowledge, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's beginning to get better now. I noticed quite recently there's an organisation set up locally in a church hall called the Death Cafe. And it's where people can go and just talk about dying and And that's something I might go up and see, but then I have my own, sort of very much my own, or maybe Lama Gangchen, Lama Caroline's views of how you help people die. So I don't know whether it's the right place, but I might go up and see what it's all about. But yeah, nobody talks about it.
I'm always a little surprised. People, they don't even ask questions.
No, because if you talk about it, you're asking for it. And I know with nursing, we try and say to the family, I think you ought to come in now. It might not be too long. And it's very hard to determine exactly when someone's going to die. And a lot of people will choose to die totally on their own. They don't want family around, and others will wait, I think, for family to turn up. But a friend of mine's mum, and she'd done quite a bit of self healing with me, and she sat with her mum and she was saying silently, really, some Buddhist prayers and self healing while her mum was there. And as her mum passed, a short while after, she saw a rainbow above her head. And I remember her ringing me straight away. She said, Jean, mum's passed, but I saw a rainbow on her head. Do you think I was imagining it? And I'm like, no, I think that's a beautiful thing to have seen. Whether you imagined it or if it was real, it doesn't matter. It was there. It was a symbol of Rainbow Bridge. Be happy. It was peaceful.
Can you explain to our listeners the meaning of that rainbow? What does that mean?
Well, the Rainbow Bridge for me is something you pass over, not necessarily to your next life, but it's part of your journey, I think. And I know Lama Gangchen always says that rainbows are very auspicious. And I know when he passed, many of us saw rainbows
All over the world. Incredible rainbow.
all over the world, really, didn't they? We saw one locally right above Crystal Palace Park, and I saw it. I always think of him now when I see a rainbow anywhere and just marvel at it.
And there's this whole body of work in Tibetan Buddhism in the higher yoga tantras of one can actually attain the rainbow
Yeah,
body, this illusory rainbow body through the Guya Samaja practice and
yeah.
some other practices. Yeah.
I've mainly stuck with self-healing and White Tara, mainly because I haven't got the time to go and do the practice or the money to go and study. And
Well, also, I've heard Lama Caroline say this many times, and Lama Gangchen, that's all we need. If we learn the self-healing practice really well, that's all we need because all the other practices are based on that.
absolutely, it has a little of it all in there. And I've just found it absolutely amazing. As I say, I have a little necklace with some relics with Lama Gangchen, and I hold that quite often when I'm treating people. And Lama Gangchen's energy goes straight to that person through me and calms people.
Tell us the experience that you had the other day. You were telling me earlier. Tell us.
Yes, I was treating a lady who'd had some really bad headaches and neck pains, and I was doing scalar therapy. So I thought, as I put the scalar on her, I thought, let me hold this.
The necklace with Lama in it, you mean?
So I held the necklace and said, Om Muni Muni Shakyamuni Soha several times as I'm treating her. And she just suddenly stopped. She said, oh, a most amazing green and then purple. She said, these colours have just come all over me. And then she shook. She said, oh, that felt so strange. She said, oh, my headache's gone.
Wow.
And it just went. It had just gone. So I like to think that was Lama Gangchen rather than my scalar.
You were holding the necklace with Lama Gangchen's picture and mantra, right? When you did this.
Yes. And the scalar in the other hand on her. Yeah. And I was trying to project his energy, which obviously I was doing because she really felt it. She could not believe it. So, yeah, it was
Wow,
quite
how powerful is
interesting.
that, right? Healing energy.
Absolutely. So now, whenever I want to send a healing energy, I hold it and think of Lama Gangchen and say a mantra. Even if I'm just walking past somebody I think's a bit down and out, I hold it and just mentally say it in my head, the self-healing mantra, and it seems to have an effect.
You send that mantra to the person.
Yeah,
Is that what you're doing?
yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously working in a hospital, you're coming across very sick people a lot of the time. I think it's just using that energy in a positive way. And it also makes me quite peaceful. So you're quite calm around people. And I think that's been one of the things being around people when they're dying and their families. It's just being able to bring that calmness. And this is a beautiful thing. It's a peaceful thing. This is the next step of their lives. I just find it helps people, really does.
You actually do the self-healing with people who want to.
Oh, yes. If people are ill, I'll go round and I maybe take a DVD and we'll do it with a DVD. And that's quite nice. So it's usually on a 1-to-1 or 2 or 3 people together. And usually when people are quite poorly and they've just found it really helpful.
One thing I wanted to highlight, so many of us, we really have a challenge to sit down and practice meditation. I hear this all the time. I've been teaching Lama Gangchen's teachings for, 27 years now. And even myself, sometimes I have this resistance. I don't want to sit, do my practice. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges, at least what they share with me, that they have a really hard time quieting their minds and settling down their mind, and getting their mind in a calm state. But you said something really important, that when you send out these healing mantras to other people, that it actually calms your mind, that you feel really calm from doing that.
Yeah, so if I might be driving in the car and see an ambulance go by. So I visualize a mantra and say it, sometimes aloud, sometimes just in my head, and just send it to that ambulance. Or if you see someone really sick or ill or drunk in the road, you just sending a good vibe by sending that mantra to them. And walking meditation. I have a dog, so I have to walk every day. So I meditate as I walk as well and repeat mantras. Occasionally have headphones on with self-healing whilst I'm walking. I think it was Lama Peter that once said to me, oh, meditation, everyone worries about it. He said, if you can't do it, go and sit on a sunny day and put a block of butter on a plate and watch it melt. He said, by the time it's melted, you've meditated. I did that once on a hot day.
You did it?
Put some butter on the plate and sat and watched it melt. During lockdown, actually, that was.
You had a lot of time on your hands.
I sat in the back garden. I said, let me try this form of meditation and put a block of butter on a plate and you do, because in the end, you just get quite absorbed in watching it melt.
Yeah.
And the mind's calmed down because you're just thinking of butter melting.
Yeah. It's single pointed concentration. That's what meditation is.
Yeah. And I remember once we were doing self-healing with Lama Caroline at the junction, and where you're visualizing, and all of a sudden I managed to visualize an absolutely perfect white lotus. Oh, what did I do? I've got it!
I've got it.
I just ruined everybody's meditation by shouting. I was so amazed I'd got this visualization because I tried
I
so
did it.
hard. Because I know some people had no trouble visualizing a lotus in each of their chakras and different numbers of petals. And I thought, why can't I do this? And I was just very concentrating one day, got the most perfect white lotus, but just got so excited. Which I thought was quite funny. And I can sometimes get it again, but I don't shout now when I get it. I try and hold it now.
I love it. I love it. Lama Michelle, he was saying that in ancient times or earlier times, when our lives weren't so distracted, there weren't so many distractions, social media and TV and phones and all the things that are distracting our minds and keeping our minds from the ability to concentrate, that people used to be able to visualize very well. They would visualize themselves as a healer, like we do in self healing practice. In Tibetan Buddhism, visualization is a very big part of our practice. But over time, because our minds get weak, our ability to concentrate gets weaker and weaker, then the importance of mantras became a bigger part of the practice, Buddhist practice. More mantras because the mantras help the mind to settle down so that you can then get into a deeper state of concentration. But they were saying that in the early days, the recitation of mantras wasn't as important because people had a greater ability to visualize.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I'm not surprised actually. Yeah.
So, when you are doing the self healing practice, though, with your different kinds of patients, are you visualizing one of the five supreme healers healing these people?
Oh, absolutely. In the beginning, when you're trying to visualize yourself as a healer, you almost say, "Oh, I can't be doing that. That's not right," you know. And I think again, I don't know whether that's just a very Western thing.
Well, it's really that whole practice is to cut our ordinary way of viewing ourselves, which is, I'm an ordinary, ignorant person, or I'm this personality, that personality, I have these characteristics. It's to cut that whole ordinary way of viewing ourselves and to then start to view ourselves as a supreme healer. Then transforms our mind and our body when we do that on a regular basis. So I think that's absolutely normal what you just said. How can I do that?
Yes,
Right.
yeah. But I do try now, and I do say I can heal. I'm going to heal. But it's taken a long time to get that reluctance to actually say I can heal. But I think doing self healing frequently has helped with that. And the visualization's got stronger and stronger the more you do it.
Don't you think the more effective your ability to transmit that energy has become over time because you practice so
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And you can just visualize parts of it. Even with all the distress in the world now, when you turn the news on, I quite often put my hand on my chest and say, Vishwa Shanti Hum, or I have Lama Gangchen up on the wall, peace with everything, everything with peace. I love that. I try and transmit peace where I can.
Beautiful. There's a lot of need in this world. I really love that what you just said because I remember Rinpoche, he watched television many times after a retreat. We'd go to his room and just sit around talking, relaxing, and he would have the television on. And he's not just watching television like a normal person is, he's actually sending out his healing energy to the world and to all these different crises that are happening around the world. And I'm so glad that you said that because right now, this time in America is very volatile. It's very unstable and very disturbing. And my husband likes to watch a lot of television. And so I'm going to start doing this now when the television's on to be sending mantras and healing energy to these situations that are happening in our country, around the world also.
Yeah, I think it makes you feel a bit more at ease. It's so easy to get heavily affected by everything you're reading. It's so sad, some of the things that you see on the television. It's almost impossible to believe, really. So I just feel the more peace you can send out, if we could all just work on peace.
I love that because then we're actually doing something to become part of the solution. Mind to mind, you're sending out this
Yeah,
peace energy other than just complaining about it or feeling sad or depressed about it, which doesn't help the situation. It just makes it worse.
yes.
Yeah.
I know an awful lot of people now, they just won't turn on the news anymore. They don't want to hear it, or I don't obsess with it. I like to know what's going on, but I try not to get too angry about it because then it makes you unpeaceful. It's easy to get angry with what you see, and it's just so negative at the end of the day to get angry at it, and you're not doing anything to try and resolve it.
You're watching suffering and then you add more suffering by your own suffering. Right?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
Right.
So, yeah, I think working on peace is one of the biggest things you can do, really. I'd love to spend a lot more time studying, and I hope when I retire, eventually, I'll be able to spend a bit more time doing a bit more studying and coming over to Albaniana a bit more. In the meantime, yeah, I'm just putting it into my day to day life and hope it helps people, really.
You've known Lama for a long time, many, 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 many years, and you not only know him, but you're daily working with this healing energy that he embodied and continues to embody, because I still feel him very strong, even though he's not in his body. Was there any story that you could share with us of something that was really funny about Lama, or something that was really made you laugh about him?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And we were doing some Tibetan dancing, and he came out, and we were all in a circle doing this dance. And he was just, oh, wrong way. Somebody went the wrong way. And we were just laughing. With Lama Gangchen, I don't know, I just felt at home with him, especially when I was at his house with Lama Caroline. He just made me feel so ordinary and welcome. There was no pretentiousness about him. He just helped me no end, really. I don't think he'd ever know how much he helped me. Or maybe he does know how much he's helped me over the years. I was just so aware of all the good works that he does all over the world, and the work with the HIV centres, because I was quite involved with HIV care here in England. Just even us working in the centre at weekends was very helpful to that centre. They always liked us being there. And again, they always said the week after we'd been there for a weekend, the place had amazing energy and people felt really happy on the Monday after, when they were in the centre after we'd been there. And I think his energy was very strong. I wish we'd have got him to that centre and we could have kept that group going. It would have been really nice, but sadly he didn't. And just all the work he did with the World Peace Foundations, etc., the religious things, it was just, here's someone just doing so much. It just never failed to amaze me. I'd be trying to find out, where's Lama Gangchen now? What country is he in? What's he doing?
Yeah, he was a Buddha.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have loved to have travelled with him, I must admit, but I went to Italy twice. So
So, Jean, I always ask this question of our guests because I love people's different answers and wisdom. So, if you could give some advice to people who would like to have a more peaceful life, like to develop themselves spiritually and versus being stuck in the material world. So, if you had some advice to give other spiritual seekers, what would you say?
I've always said, learn to breathe, learn to calm your breathing. That's something I've always found has helped people. Whenever anybody is in distress, breathe and relax. And breathe in, breathe out, relax. And find a teacher that's going to help you if that's what you want. I've worked with people of all different religions, and whatever their religion, work with it and just breathe to calm your mind. And I just think learning good breathing techniques is something that I've been teaching young people, anybody who's in a panic. And that is something very much that we did with self-healing, was learning that proper deep breathing and letting things go, learning to let go. Mantras aren't for everybody. So some people love reciting mantras. Some people just learn one and repeat that. And if that's what's good for you, just do the one mantra. It's fine. And I particularly use the self-healing mantra, that Om Moon Mooni Soha. And it just works for me. I can think it, I can say it, and I can visualize the mantra. And I just think it really is just try and be peaceful. Compassion. I think what this world lacks, and what Tibetan Buddhism probably showed me, is compassion, to have compassion for people and places, animals and everything. And I think that calmness helps you. And it's so needed at the moment, especially, I don't know, in this country, mental health is at its all-time worst in this country.
In our country, too.
Yeah.
I love that because it's really starting with ourselves, that once we can calm our breath, which then calms our mind. And when our mind is more calm, then we can actually have more compassion for other people.
And that's very much, I think, what I learned doing self-healing, was to calm myself down. because I would get quite tense, and obviously with a really busy life and 6 children and working hard, there was never a lot of time, but I would make time to do some deep breathing and calm myself down. And then that spread out to the family and calm them down. You could see it working. And with my daughter, who I took to Albignano, who has quite severe anxiety and personality disorder, just being there just calmed her right down. I wish I could send her out there to live. She'd probably be fine out there. But yes, it's helped her just learning that breathing. And then once, as you say, you accept yourself better. And, yeah, I just have to stop myself really not from bringing every homeless person home with me. It's a bit too far.
The challenge of a bodhisattva. You are a true bodhisattva, Jeanne. Wow, what an inspiration to talk to you. I'd like to close, Jeanne, with some kind of a prayer or a dedication. I always ask our guests to say some kind of dedication that would, that this conversation be of benefit to other people. So is there some kind of favorite mantra that you have or favorite prayer that you would like to share with us?
As I say, it is really just the self-healing. My main mantra is Om Muni Muni Shakyamuni Soha, and I repeat that constantly.
Could you say it 3 times for us?
Yeah. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakyamuni Soha. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakyamuni Soha. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakyamuni Soha. Om Vishwa Shanti Hum. And I repeat that.
You're practicing,
Nice.
girl. I'm inspired by your practice. So beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for joining us. I really loved this conversation, and there's so many pieces of jewels that you have shared with us that I think me for sure, but I'm sure our listeners will take away and go, wow, I'm going to apply that to my life. I really love this conversation, Jeanne. And I look forward to meeting you in person one day.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
In London's bustling streets, a tale unfolds of Jeanne Gregory with a heart of gold. In the 1990s, she met Lama Gangchen, whose teaching sparked a flame within. A nurse and pain therapist by trade, she embraced the dharma unafraid. With 6 children to raise, a single mom's plight, yet she delved into wisdom, seeking the light. Creating a self-healing group, she shared the profound teachings that she dared to integrate into her busy life's flow, where Dharma's essence began to glow. Through trials and triumphs, she learned to weave the threads of compassion to relieve the suffering of those who were ill. With a touch of kindness, she'd instill. With words of comfort, she'd softly impart, guiding them gently, heart to heart. Jeanne Gregory, a true bodhisattva indeed, whose life of service, love, kindness, and peace are an inspiration for all who seek. I love this conversation with Jeanne Gregory. Wow. I learned so much from hearing her practical wisdom. And for someone who is so busy, I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to have 6 children, be a single mom, work a full-time job, take care of a household, and she has a dog, and she's always helping people. The day that we were scheduled to have our podcast interview, she had to postpone it because someone called her that morning a woman who had just had a stroke and who was bound to a wheelchair, needed to go to the hospital. So Jeanne takes her to the hospital and was a bit stranded on the streets to find a taxi to take her back home that would accommodate a wheelchair. So they couldn't find one. And so Jeanne brought her back to her home. And the woman stayed in her home for several hours before they could find a taxi to take her back home. And so that's the Bodhisattva that Jeanne is. And I love, love, love the practical examples of applying the Dharma and the self-healing practice and Lama Gangchen's teachings into your daily life. Like she described, walking your dog, watching television, instead of just mindlessly watching television, we're actually sending mantras and love and prayers out to the people that are on the news, who are various kinds of conflicts around the world. Walking her dog, as she described, she'll be walking down the street with her dog and sending mantras to people who, maybe are homeless people or people who look sad or who are down and out. Just so many practical examples. And so for those of us who have always say the excuse, I don't have time to meditate, or I don't have time to do my practice. Well, look at Jeanne. She's an example of, you can find the time. She's got 6 kids. She's a single mom, full-time job. She finds the time. It's really more about commitment and the commitment to walking the Dharma path, the commitment to living a peaceful, joyful life and to being of service to others. So I even think that when we take our phones, we're all so addicted to our cell phones nowadays. When we pick up our phones in the morning, we could dedicate, when we look at the phone, we could dedicate that every conversation that I have today, every text that I send, every email that I send, every app that I open, I dedicate that to bringing peace to all beings throughout the world. Something simple like that, a dedication for using our phone in a more meaningful way. And that's kind of another example of being on the Bodhisattva way. Or in the morning, when we put our makeup on, or we're brushing our teeth, or you're putting whatever your morning routine is, that you dedicate that putting, say, lipstick on. I dedicate putting this lipstick on or washing my face, that I'll see the beauty in every person that I see today. So that's another way to integrate the Dharma into our daily life. So I love all these examples. And so the second takeaway I'd like to highlight in Jeanne's conversation is the joy that she expressed, really the joy of serving others. Here's someone who puts other people before her. Her whole life is like that, as she described. And yet there's so much joy that she shares with that. So it takes me back to the poem that I read in the beginning about Kahlil Gibran, when I was more fully awakened that service is joy. And then the third thing I'd like to highlight is learn to breathe. Jeanne's advice to all of us or spiritual seekers that really learn how to breathe, that when we learn how to breathe deeply and the vase breathing in the self-healing practice, different kinds of pranayama practices, they really help us to quiet our minds, our bodies. And there's so many profound benefits from really learning to breathe well, as well as, of course, reaching higher states of consciousness. So those 3 things I wanted to highlight in what Jeanne shared with us today. And I hope you find it as inspiring as I do. And if you'd like to follow along with us and subscribe, please subscribe to our show on either Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. If you have a question you'd like to ask me, please reach out to me at lamahealer.com. And if you'd like more information about Lama Gangchen's teachings and humanitarian activities and our meditation centers around the world, please go to nalso.org. And if you'd like to sponsor an episode, we really appreciate the sponsorship. We're all volunteer driven. Please reach out to me at lamahealer.com. And if you'd like to go on a retreat, I really encourage everyone to go on a spiritual retreat and go to a holy place sometime this year, at least once this year. In these holy places is where we really can access this deep sense of inner calm and inner realizations. So you could go to nalso.org and find out about our retreats in Brazil and in Albignano, Italy, Spain, many that we have around the world. And so thanks for joining us, and see you next time. And in the meantime, please be well, be peaceful, be happy. Lama Gyan.